Welcome to the Global War Watch Network, your go-to source for breaking down the complex events shaping our world.
We're glad you're here. We're about to get into a really high-stakes military deployment that honestly seems to defy all logic. To make sure you stay on top of critical developments just like this one, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you never miss an update.
All right, let's jump right in. Picture this: 13,000 troops and a squadron of fighter jets touch down in an active war zone, setting up shop right next to the world's most valuable energy assets. But here's the real kicker. The country sending them is also the one hosting the peace talks for that exact same war. Sounds impossible, right? Well, it happened, and we're going to break down exactly how and why.
To really get our heads around this, we have to start with the facts on the ground. Let's look at what actually went down in April of 2026.
First off, just the sheer scale of it all. We are talking about roughly 13,000 Pakistani ground troops sent to Saudi Arabia. Now, to give you some context, that's the biggest force Pakistan has sent to the kingdom since the Gulf War back in 1991. And it wasn't just boots on the ground. Along with them, you had between 10 and 18 advanced fighter jets from the Pakistan Air Force, not to mention support aircraft. So let's be clear, this was no training exercise. This was a fully combat-ready force.
But the real headline here, the thing that makes you go, wow, is the location. They weren't sent to some remote desert outpost. No. They were stationed at King Abdulaziz Air Base in Dhahran, which is just 7 kilometers from the global headquarters of Saudi Aramco. That's the absolute heart of the kingdom's oil industry, and you guessed it, a primary target in the ongoing US-Iran conflict. And this timeline just perfectly illustrates the central puzzle here. The timing is absolutely everything. Pakistani forces start landing in Saudi Arabia on the morning of April 11th. And by that very same evening, the ceasefire talks that Pakistan was hosting between the US and Iran completely fell apart. So the supposed mediator was at the same time deploying forces to one side of the conflict. It's just wild.
So you've got to be asking, how was a deployment this risky even possible? Well, this wasn't some snap decision. This was actually the activation of a new, totally game-changing agreement that basically rewrote the security rulebook for the entire region. It's called the Strategic Mutual Defense Agreement, or SMDA for short. It was signed just a few months earlier, in September 2025. And this pact is the legal bedrock for everything we're seeing unfold. At the very heart of the SMDA is this one single sentence, and it reads almost like a carbon copy of NATO's famous Article 5. It takes what was a decades-long friendship and turns it into a formal, binding military alliance. To put it simply, an attack on Riyadh is now, by law, an attack on Islamabad. And to really appreciate how big of a deal this is, just look at the difference. For decades, sure, Pakistan sent trainers and advisors to Saudi Arabia. That was cooperation, but it was optional. The SMDA changes that completely. Now there's a formal, institutionalized commitment to mutual defense, and it's the very first of its kind for either of these nations. Which, of course, raises the big question, why now? What on earth pushed these two countries to sign such a game-changing pact in late 2025? Well, the answer lies in the escalating chaos that was pretty much setting the entire region on fire. The timeline really tells the story. The catalyst seems to be an Israeli military strike in Doha, Qatar, back in early September 2025. That attack, on a fellow Gulf state, sent massive shockwaves across the region. Just weeks later, bam, the SMDA was signed. Then, when the US-Iran war kicked off in February 2026, that pact went from being a theoretical guarantee to a critical wartime necessity. And for Saudi Arabia, this was a crystal clear message to Washington. After watching Israel strike a neighboring ally, Riyadh really started to doubt America's security guarantees. The pact with Pakistan was basically strategic diversification. It was their way of saying, hey, if you won't protect us, we'll find someone who will. Of course, an alliance this significant doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It immediately rearranged the entire global chessboard, forcing major world powers to completely reassess their strategies. You've got 4 key players who were immediately forced to react. For Iran, this looked like a direct threat. For India, a brand new complication. For the United States, a major challenge to its influence. And for China, well, for them, it was a quiet but very significant victory. So let's break that down a bit.
Iran is now looking at its nightmare scenario, Saudi money funding Pakistan's powerful military right on its border. India's worried about an emboldened Pakistan potentially disrupting its massive $42 billion trade with the Saudis. The U.S. sees its regional partners hedging their bets, looking for other options. And China? China wins without even having to play, as its key ally Pakistan pulls Saudi Arabia closer into its orbit.
And all of this brings us right back to Pakistan, which is now caught in this incredibly dangerous double game. It's a geopolitical balancing act that just seems completely impossible to maintain.
This chart shows you exactly why this time is so different. You might hear people say, oh, Pakistan has sent troops before, but the details tell a totally different story. The 1982 deployment, that was during peacetime to a rear base over 1,000 kilometers from anything important. The 2026 deployment, it's during an active war to a frontline airbase just 7 kilometers from the world's most vital oil facilities. This isn't history repeating itself, it's a massive escalation.
And here we are, at the core contradiction of it all. On one hand, Pakistan is the mediator, hosting peace talks and even acting as Iran's diplomatic representative in the U.S. for decades. But on the other hand, it's a co-belligerent, legally bound by that new defense pact to fight against Iran. I mean, how can you possibly be the referee and a player on the field at the very same time? And well, money might give us part of the answer. The day after the talks collapsed and the deployment was confirmed, Saudi Arabia and Qatar jointly pledged $5 billion in support to Pakistan. The timing is, well, it's pretty hard to ignore. This doesn't really look like a payment for neutral mediation. It looks a whole lot more like a payment for military reinforcement. Which leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? Is this some brilliant, sustainable balancing act? Or, by placing 13,000 of its soldiers directly in the line of fire, has Pakistan just created a tripwire that could drag a nuclear-armed state into a direct conflict, sparking a much wider, much more devastating regional war? And that's all the time we have for this explainer. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Global War Watch Network. If you found this useful, please do us a favor and like, share, and subscribe for more. We really want to know what you think. Is this a brilliant strategic move or a reckless gamble? Let us know in the comments section. And come join the conversation on our social media channels. All the links are right there in the description. We'll see you next time.